Today, we are stepping into a world that is dark, terrifying, and so prophetic that its very title has become part of our everyday language. We are talking about George Orwell's masterpiece, 1984. This is not just a novel. It is a warning, a political text woven into a devastating human drama. We will see how the totalitarian state of Oceania works, how Winston Smith's fragile rebellion begins, and what terrifying philosophy allows the party to establish complete power over the human being. Get ready, because the ideas in this book have not lost their force even today. But before we enter the world of Big Brother, if you find this video interesting, please press the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot.
The world of 1984 is brutal, cold, and saturated with endless war. Three superstates dominate the Earth: Oceania, Eurasia, and Eastasia. Our story takes place in Airstrip 1, the former Great Britain, now one of Oceania's provinces. These three powers seem to be locked in an eternal war. One day, Oceania is at war with Eurasia and allied with Eastasia. The next day, the state announces that Oceania has always been at war with Eastasia. Yesterday's enemy becomes today's ally, and history is immediately rewritten as if no other truth had ever existed. This constant war has a very specific purpose. War consumes the surplus production of industrial society, keeping the people poor and dependent on the state. But more importantly, it creates a permanent atmosphere of fear, hatred, and patriotic hysteria. The anger of the people is no longer directed toward their own condition. It is directed outward, toward a faceless, constantly changing enemy. This is where one of the party's central slogans gains its power: war is peace.
Oceania is ruled by the all-powerful party. At its head stands a mysterious, mustached figure, Big Brother. His face is everywhere, on posters, on coins, on walls, and on the ever-present telescreens. Beneath his image are the words, "Big Brother is watching you." This phrase means both protection and threat at the same time. It is never completely clear whether Big Brother is a real person or simply a manufactured symbol, a figure onto whom the party directs love, fear, loyalty, and obedience. He is a father, a leader, and the god of this new political religion. Oceania is a strictly hierarchical society. At the very top stands the inner party, the architects of society, who make up less than 2% of the population. They live in relative luxury and possess absolute power. Beneath them is the outer party, the bureaucratic and working apparatus of the state. This is where our protagonist, Winston Smith, belongs. Members of the outer party are controlled more intensely than anyone else. They live in poverty, constant tension, and psychological pressure. They are the hands and feet of the party, but every step they take is watched. At the bottom are the proles, the proletariat. They make up about 85% of Oceania's population. The party looks down on them with contempt and considers them almost animal-like. As one party slogan says, "Proles and animals are free."
The proles live in poverty, but they are monitored less strictly. They are allowed to form families, drink alcohol, gamble, and enjoy a certain amount of emotional freedom. The party considers them intellectually incapable of organized rebellion. They are a mass to be managed, not a force to be listened to. And yet Winston writes in his diary, "If there is hope, it lies in the proles." In them, he sees a remaining human quality, a naturalness, and a vast number of people, the only force that could theoretically overthrow the party. But the problem is that the proles do not understand their own power. They do not have the language, the consciousness, or the organized will to fight against their oppressor. The state of Oceania is governed through 4 ministries. The first is the Ministry of Peace, which in reality manages war. Its task is to keep the country in a permanent state of conflict so that the system never collapses. Then comes the Ministry of Plenty. It is responsible for the economy and rationing. But its real job is not to create abundance, but to produce falsehood. It constantly announces increases in production and improvements in rations, even while people are starving and the country is falling apart. Reality is poverty, but the statistics say success. The Ministry of Truth is the place where Winston works. The name seems to suggest truth, But in reality, this is the party's propaganda machine. Its purpose is not to spread truth, but to create truth. In this ministry, thousands of people change old newspapers, books, photographs, and documents every day, reshaping the past to fit the party's present needs. If the party says today that something different happened yesterday, then yesterday it really did happen that way. Truth is no longer what happened. Truth is what the party says. And finally, there is the most dangerous ministry of all, the ministry of love. This is the center of state security, punishment, and torture. Here, order is maintained through fear, pain, and the reshaping of the mind. It is a windowless building where people enter but never come out unchanged. Its purpose is not only to suppress dissent, its purpose is to cure the thought criminal so completely that in the end, he truly loves Big Brother. Oceania's official ideology is Ingsoc, English socialism. Its power lies not only in weapons or police, but in psychological control. One of the main tools of that control is Newspeak, the official language of Oceania. Newspeak is designed not to expand thought, but to reduce it. Its vocabulary becomes smaller every year. Words such as freedom, justice, or science gradually disappear. The idea is simple. If a word no longer exists, the idea itself becomes harder to form. The ultimate goal of Newspeak is to make thought crime impossible, not because a person is afraid to express such thoughts, but because the language itself no longer allows those thoughts to be fully formed. The second major doctrine is doublethink. This is the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs in the mind at the same time and accept both as true. To know that the party is lying and at the same time sincerely believe that it is telling the truth. To use logic against logic itself. Doublethink is the foundation of party discipline. It allows the inner party to know the full mechanism of the lie and still believe fanatically in its own correctness. And it helps members of the outer party rewrite history every day without feeling internal contradiction. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. This is doublethink in action. For a member of the outer party like Winston, daily life is gray and exhausting. He lives in a crumbling building called Victory Mansions. The city is falling apart. Plaster falls from the walls, elevators do not work, and the food is synthetic and tasteless. Everywhere there is the telescreen, a device that both broadcasts propaganda and watches the individual. It hears voices, notices facial expressions, tracks bodily movements, and sometimes even changes in heartbeat. Privacy no longer exists. Because of this constant surveillance, people are forced to monitor themselves at every moment. One wrong expression, one doubtful look, one brief emotion can become fatal. This is called face crime. Life becomes a performance in which everyone must act out loyalty under the eyes of Big Brother and the thought police.
Our protagonist, Winston Smith, is a weak and tired man of 39. He is a small, seemingly insignificant cog in the enormous machine of the Ministry of Truth. But inside him, there is one thing that makes him dangerous to the party: memory. Winston vaguely remembers the world before the revolution. He remembers a time when different values existed, when personal freedom and objective truth still seemed possible. These fragmented memories give him no peace and make him hate the sterile, false world of the party. He experiences a deep intellectual and spiritual loneliness. He believes he may be the last person still capable of thinking forbidden thoughts. At first, his rebellion is not a revolutionary plan. It is a search for truth. He wants to understand how the world became like this, and even more importantly, why it became like this. In the world of Oceania, such curiosity is already the greatest crime. Winston's rebellion begins with one simple but decisive act. In the Prole district, inside an antique shop, he buys a beautiful blank diary. Buying it is already a risk. Writing in it is potentially fatal. In his apartment, in a small corner where the telescreen cannot see him directly, Winston begins to write. This simple action is revolutionary. In a state that controls all information and all memory, keeping a personal record is almost like declaring independence. By doing this, he says that his thoughts matter, his memories have value, his inner world does not belong entirely to the party. He writes for the future, for a time when thought may be expressed freely, even though he himself is almost certain that such a time will never come.
His first entries are confused, a chaotic description of a war film he has seen. But soon his pen stops on one phrase, and the words appear again and again on the page. Down with Big Brother. Down with Big Brother. Down with Big Brother. Seeing these words frightens Winston, but it also strengthens him. He has committed thought crime and given it physical form. There is no way back. The story of Winston's lowliness changes when he meets Julia. At first, Winston hates her. Julia is a young, energetic party member who works in the fiction department. Winston assumes she's the perfect servant to the party. That is why he is shocked when Julia's secret passes him a small note that says, "I love you." This one sentence shatters Winston's world. Suddenly, there is a possibility that he is not alone, that even in this bleak world, secrecy, connection, and human warmth can still exist. Winston and Julia's relationship is not only a love affair, it is an act of political disobedience. But Julia's rebellion is very different from Winston's. She is not interested in historical truth, ideology, or grand political ideas. Her resistance is personal, physical, and practical. She fights the party precisely where it tries hardest to control the human being, in desire, pleasure, and private life. Two important symbols appear in Winston's inner world. The first is the Golden Country, a recurring dream of a bright, natural, peaceful landscape. It is an image of a lost world, beauty, nature, freedom, and desire. It stands in sharp contrast to the dirty, collapsing mechanical reality of London.
The second symbol is the glass paperweight that Winston buys in the same antique shop. Inside the glass is a small piece of pink coral. For Winston, this object is a tangible fragment of the past, something the party has not erased, rewritten, or turned into propaganda. When Winston and Julia begin meeting in the room above the antique shop, the glass paperweight becomes a symbol of their secret world. It is as if their love is preserved inside the glass, like that small piece of coral, beautiful, fragile, and doomed from the beginning. The room Winston rents from the shop owner, Mr. Charrington, becomes the center of their rebellion. It is old, dusty, and simple, but the most important thing is that there seems to be no telescreen inside. In this room, they can be themselves for a few hours. They can speak freely, be together, and enjoy small forbidden pleasures: real coffee, sugar, and human closeness. This room becomes a temporary shelter for them, a small pocket of the past cut out of the horrifying present. Here, they feel not like party members, but like human beings. But that feeling is precisely what makes it so dangerous. In Oceania, privacy is the final illusion. Throughout the novel, Winston feels a strange connection to O'Brien, a charismatic and intellectual member of the inner party. Winston believes he sees hidden dissatisfaction in O'Brien's eyes, a silent agreement, some kind of spark that cannot be expressed in words. This belief becomes an obsession for Winston. O'Brien represents everything Winston is searching for: intelligence, calmness, sophistication, and most importantly, a possible hatred of the party. He becomes a father figure, a confessor, and the revolutionary leader Winston has been waiting for all his life. Eventually, O'Brien runs Winston and Julia to his luxurious apartment. His home is completely different from Winston's gray reality. There's space, calm, good food, and he can even turn off the telescreen for a short time, a privilege reserved only for members of the inner party. O'Brien tells them that resistance is real. The Brotherhood exists.
The Brotherhood is an underground resistance movement supposedly led by Emmanuel Goldstein, the party's greatest traitor and the #1 enemy of the people. Goldstein is the main object of the daily 2 Minutes hate. O'Brien seems to accept Winston and Julia into this secret movement. Then he gives Winston a forbidden book, The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism, supposedly written by Goldstein. Winston reads this book with intense fascination. It explains the party's strategy, the purpose of permanent war, and the philosophy of class rule. The book confirms everything Winston has suspected. The party's goal is not to build a utopia. Its goal is to freeze history at the moment when power belongs forever to a small oligarchical group. It is a cold, brilliant, and horrifying analysis of the party's machinery. But Winston does not understand the most important thing. The book itself may be part of the trap. The party not only allows its existence, but may even have helped create it. The book is like bait. It attracts the most intelligent and dangerous dissidents so the party can find them. One evening, Winston and Julia are in their secret room. Winston is reading Goldstein's book and feels a kind of intellectual victory. He thinks he finally understands how the system works, even though he still does not fully understand why it exists in such a form. Suddenly, a cold voice comes from behind the picture hanging on the wall. "You are the dead." The illusion of their shelter collapses in a single second. There has been a hidden telescreen in the room all along. Soldiers enter, beat Julia, and take her away. The kind old Mr. Charrington enters with a straightened posture, and it becomes clear that he is an agent of the thought police. The glass paperweight, the symbol of Winston's small private world, falls to the floor and shatters into pieces. This moment means that the party has invaded even their most hidden space. Winston and Julia have been trapped. Their brief, fragile rebellion is over. They are taken to the place where Winston always knew he would end up, the Ministry of Love. Winston is thrown into a windowless, brightly lit cell. Here, day and night no longer exist. He is starved, beaten, humiliated, and gradually stripped of his dignity. The purpose of this first stage is to break his body so that fear and helplessness sink deeply into his consciousness. He sees other prisoners as well. Some of them disappear before his eyes. Then he meets his colleague Parsons, a man who had always seemed to be the embodiment of party loyalty. He has been denounced by his own daughter because he spoke against Big Brother in his sleep. The most horrifying part is that Parsons is proud of his daughter. In his mind, the child did the right thing. This shows that in Oceania, no one is safe, not even the most loyal person. Then the true architect of his destruction arrives. It is O'Brien. With the last spark of hope, Winston says to him, "They got you too?" O'Brien answers coldly, "They got me a long time ago." At that moment, everything becomes clear. O'Brien is not a prisoner. He is the interrogator. The man Winston saw as his savior is, in reality, his destroyer. O'Brien explains to Winston that his re-education will take place in 3 stages. The first stage is learning. This is the stage of torture. Winston is placed on a machine where the level of pain is controlled by a dial. O'Brien asks questions, increases the pain, and forces Winston to give the correct answers. Winston is forced to confess to absurd crimes: espionage, sabotage, theft, murder. The truth of the confessions does not matter. What matters is that the party demonstrates its absolute power over his body and mind. Winston learns that resistance is useless. Pain is absolute. The party can force a person to say anything. The second stage is understanding. Here, the physical torture decreases and psychological dismantling begins. O'Brien holds long philosophical conversations with Winston. He patiently explains the party's true motivation. This is where the novel reaches its intellectual core, where Orwell reveals the most horrifying why behind Oceania. O'Brien mocks Winston's belief that the party seeks power for some higher purpose. According to him, past totalitarian regimes were cowardly because they pretended to seek power for the people, for justice, or for the future. The party is different. It seeks power only for the sake of power. O'Brien says, "We are not interested in the good of others. We are interested solely in power." Then he expresses one of the most terrifying ideas in the novel. Power is not a means, power is an end. One does not establish a dictatorship in order to safeguard a revolution. One makes the revolution in order to establish the dictatorship. The object of persecution is persecution. The object of torture is torture. The object of power is power. O'Brien explains that the party's vision of the future is a boot stamping on a human face forever. He holds up 4 fingers and demands that Winston see 5. When Winston says he sees 4, O'Brien increases the pain until Winston's mind begins to surrender reality itself. According to O'Brien, reality does not exist in the external world. Reality exists in the human mind, and since the party controls the mind, it controls reality as well. The final stage is acceptance. Winston's body is restored. He is fed, clothed, and allowed to regain strength. He has already experienced intellectual surrender. Now he understands the party's doctrines and can see 5 fingers if the party commands him to. He writes on his slate, "Freedom is slavery. 2 + 2 = 5." But inside him there still remains a small, deep emotional core. At one moment, without thinking, he cries Julia's name in his sleep. This means he still loves Julia more than Big Brother. His transformation is not yet complete. To destroy this last resistance, he must be taken to room 101. O'Brien explains that room 101 is the place where a person faces the thing he fears most in the world. This fear is different for everyone. Every person has one thing they cannot endure, their final primal terror. For Winston, it is rats. Inside the room, a cage-like device containing 2 large, hungry rats is brought close to his face. O'Brien explains that when he pulls the lever, the door will open and the rats will eat his face. In this moment of mind-destroying terror, the last remaining fragment of Winston's humanity collapses. His loyalty to Julia is destroyed. He screams, "Do it to Julia! Do it to Julia! Not me! I don't care what you do to her! Tear her face off, strip her to the bones, but not me! Julia, not me!" This is the final betrayal. Winston has sacrificed the person he loved in order to save himself. He has transferred the punishment onto her. In that moment, his inner self is completely emptied. Now he is ready to be filled with love for the party. After being released from the Ministry of Love, Winston is a broken man. He often sits in the Chestnut Tree Cafe, a sad refuge for people who were once thought criminals, then destroyed and reintegrated into the system. He drinks victory gin, solves chess problems, and passively absorbs party propaganda from the telescreen. He is now the ghost of himself, an empty shell. One day, he meets Julia again. She has gone through the same process. Her body is scarred, and her spirit seems to be gone. They admit to each other that they both betrayed one another. The feeling is no longer there. In its place is cold indifference. Their love, which was once a form of political resistance, is now only a bitter memory. The final pages of the novel are a portrait of total surrender. The telescreen announces a great military victory for Oceania, and Winston suddenly feels a flood of emotion. It is no longer love for Julia. It is no longer hatred of the party. It is a blessed, ecstatic joy. The struggle is finished. And the final, terrifying sentence says everything. He loved Big Brother. It seems as if the novel ends in absolute despair, but the book does not completely close there. It is followed by an appendix, The Principles of Newspeak. This appendix analyzes the structure and purpose of the party's language. But there is one important detail. The text is written in standard, old-fashioned English and entirely in the past tense. It speaks about Newspeak and Ingsoc as historical phenomena, as if the author is looking back from the future. This suggests that the party's regime may not have been eternal. Many readers see in this appendix Orwell's hidden message of hope. Even though the party achieved total victory over Winston, perhaps the party itself eventually fell. Sometime, somewhere, beyond the story we have just read, the boot stopped stamping on the human face and free thought was able to return.
George Orwell's 1984 went beyond the boundaries of literature. The word Orwellian has become a synonym for state-controlled surveillance, lies, propaganda, and oppression. The concepts of the book, Big Brother, The Thought Police, Room 101, Doublethink, are now part of our cultural consciousness. 1984 remains an eternal warning. It warns us against any absolute ideology, whether left-wing or right-wing. It reminds us that language can become a weapon when it is used to limit thought. It reminds us that truth is fragile and requires constant vigilance to be protected. This novel shows how easily history can be rewritten for political purposes, how dangerous a world becomes when facts are no longer sacred and reality depends on the command of power. But more than anything, 1984 is a defense of the inner freedom of the human being. It reminds us that our personal memory, our love, our loyalty, and our right to our own thoughts are exactly what make us human, and the fight to preserve them, as Orwell warns us, never ends. If this deep dive into the dark and terrifying world of 1984 was interesting to you, press the like button, share your thoughts about the novel in the comments, and subscribe to the channel if you want more literary analysis like this. Without your support, creating videos like this would not be possible. Until next time.